A lot of the questions in forums and on Reddit are about punching things, such as in this example with that offset shadow. Hello and welcome to the Vector Garden. In this video we're going to talk about this effect with the offset shadow, and of course, you know me, it will be a live effect because that has a lot of advantages. Not only can you change the font or the text itself, you can also adjust the tracking, because when you create a shadow like this of course will affect the tracking of your text and you might want to adjust it. And then we will also throw in some extra effects provided by plugins to this, because then you can add some more spice. We're going to start with that text. I'm just going to make a copy, and of course, this is all in the appearance panel, so first of all, I'm going to get rid of all of them. There are several ways to do this. Let's take a look at the first one. So I have selected the text object, and then I can add a new fill with this button. I'm going to make that one red. That new fill needs to be behind the text, so we're going to move it below the characters, and then it's gone. What we need to do now is use an effect. Distort and transform, and then move this slightly to the side. I'm going to use it 0.5. The amount depends on the size of the text, of course. Now we have this edit, and I'm just going to duplicate it and then take this and make it black so we can see the difference. And I'm going to edit the transform effect, and we're going to make this 1.2. So now we have that. And the easy way out of this would be to just make this fill white. But then you cannot put it on any background because the white fill will always shine through. So we need it to be invisible and punch everything below it. And to do that, we're going to use a knockout group. The knockout group for this will demand that something is with 0% opacity. So this is the white fill, and we're going to edit the opacity and set it to 0. And now, of course, this white fill is gone. But in order to make it punch, now we need to edit this opacity. That is the opacity of the whole object. So now when we set this to knockout group, and you need to click twice to get the check mark into that, then we have that effect. Sometimes you do not see it, and then you have to go to View, Preview, and CPU, because the GPU preview and knockout groups do not behave well together. Now let's zoom into this. And you see there are sharp pointed corners here. Now maybe you think that doesn't fit with the text because everything about this typeface is rounded. So having this pointed here is not really nice. So could we perhaps get this rounded? When doing this with the knockout group, that is not possible. In order to be able to round that, we would need to create this in a different way, and that is possible. So I'm going to make another copy and get rid of them. So now what we need to do is offset this and then punch it inside the live effect. Now to do that, again, we're going to start with the new fill. I'm going to again make that red and move it behind the characters. And now we will need to offset it, make a copy, and then subtract it. I'm going to apply the transform effect with 0.5, that is okay. And now we need another transform effect that makes a copy. So we're going to apply transform once more, and then make the copy like this. And perhaps move it a little more. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is add a Pathfinder effect. So that will really punch it. So let's add the Pathfinder, subtract. And you see that didn't work out too well. Let's move it below. So now we get this, but it's only on the first letter. And that happens because this word is not a compound path. You might know that when you're working with groups, the Pathfinder, so the Pathfinder from the Pathfinder panel, does not work too well. It produces surprising results. And that's what's happening inside here as well. So if you would expand this, you would get groups. So what we need inside of this is a compound path, but we don't have that. Let's make another copy because there is a way out of that. I'm going to get rid of that once again. And what you could do is, let's go to the Pathfinder panel, we want to keep the live text. What we can do is turn this into a compound shape. With the Pathfinder panel in the menu, make compound shape. So this is still editable. So when you double click it, you can edit it. You can adjust the font or the text, and you can adjust the tracking and whatnot. But it's a compound shape. So, and when we now do that thing with those additional transform effects, let's make the bottom one red again, and let's add that transform effect. We're going to make this 0.5 and then add another one and make that with 1 copy. And then here we make 1.2. And then we can add the Pathfinder subtract. But it needs to be here. And you see, then this works. That's why you're seeing in some YouTube videos that people first make a compound shape out of their text and then do whatever they need to do, and most of the time this includes some Pathfinder effect. Now, in order to round these, we would need a round corner effect. But the round corner effect that is built into Illustrator is pretty bad. If you go to Stylize and round the corners now, so very small amount, and let's move this down here, then you see, well, you get some rounding, but you also get some pretty bad effects on here. So what we need to round those is Astute Graphics plugins. They have a round corners effect that does this. And also, to get back to here, they have a nice effect that can turn this into a compound path. Let's go to this fill here again and go to Effect, AG Utilities. And here we've got Make Compound Path. So this needs to be at the top. So we've got the fill, and then we immediately make it a compound path, and then apply the transform, and then the subtract, and everything works because we have a compound path in here. So now we can go in here again into Vector Scribe and use AG Corners, which rounds the corners. So let's apply this. I'm going to use 1. Let's start with 1. So you see that is up here. That doesn't work. So we can move this into different places. So let's move it here, and then you get different results. So this typeface is rounded, so we don't actually see something. So in this case, with this typeface, we do not see that. So let's make a copy of that and use a different typeface. So I'm going to use Myriad, and it's bold here. And you see this round corners, when it's applied in this place before the subtraction, then we get some nice roundings here, but some corners are not rounded. So let's zoom in again. If we move it below subtract, then you see we've got the nice rounding here. So the placement of effects is pretty important. Now let's get back to this one. And here I'm going to move it below subtract, and then you see we've got nice rounded shadows here, and these are shortened a lot. If you do not like that, then we need to get into the corners again and change the radius. I'm going to set this to 0.5, and then it should get slightly longer, but maybe that is still too much. So let's set this to 0.2. Like this, and then you see it gets a little longer. So you have to adjust that, but then what we can get is a shadow that matches the style of the typeface using effects and Astute Graphics plugins.